They say that the enemy unites the nation. And in China, this role is happily being assigned to Donald Trump. The former U.S. president, with his 145% tariffs, has become a joke in memes and viral videos made by Chinese nationalists. In many of them, Trump, Elon Musk, and Vice President J.D. Vance are seen sweating it out in sneaker factories and assembling iPhones, with plenty of artificial intelligence and mockery to go around. But all this theatrics has a clear goal: to turn a real crisis into a patriotic spectacle. Creating an external villain is an old tactic of regimes that don't want their people looking inward. The truth is, the Chinese aren't laughing because they're strong. They're laughing because they're trying to forget. Forget that the country is on the edge of an economic abyss, and that behind Xi Jinping's confident posture, there's a ticking time bomb that even Trump couldn't blow up on his own. She gives speeches about self-sufficiency and repeats that China has never depended on anyone. But the problems eroding the country today were planted in Chinese soil: a rotten real estate market, a youth without jobs, and a pension system on the brink of collapse. Trump is just the convenient excuse, a smokescreen for a fire that started long before he arrived. And while the West focuses on the geopolitical circus, the Chinese economy groans in silence. And that, yes, should be what concerns us. The Chinese economy still impresses with its size, but inside, it staggers like a skyscraper built on quicksand. The biggest sign of this? The collapse of the real estate sector, the very one that, for years, was sold as the symbol of the Chinese miracle. Millions of families invested all their savings in their own homes, only to see prices plummet in the last 5 years. The result? Ghost towns spread across the country, pristine buildings with curtains on the windows, but where no one turns on the lights at night. And it's not just about real estate speculation. It's about trust, or the lack of it. When the biggest pillar of the middle class collapses, what's left? Insecurity, silent panic, and a government that can no longer pretend everything is under control. The attempt to contain the disaster came too late. Credit restrictions for construction companies were imposed when the damage was already done. The market froze, confidence evaporated, and predictions of falling property prices continue. But it's not just the ceiling that's cracking. The floor is too. The Chinese youth are massively unemployed, with rates over 20% among urban young people. And even those who have jobs don't know if they'll have a pension. It's predicted that the country's pension fund will be depleted by 2035. It's in this scenario that Xi Jinping tries to sell prosperity and stability. But no one wants to buy. No matter how much the government announces incentives, wage increases, and discounts on TVs and electric cars, the Chinese consumer seems to have gotten a message. If the state doesn't guarantee the future, it's better to save every penny. If China's present is worrying, its future is terrifying. The younger generation, the one that grew up under the promise of a modern, prosperous, and innovative country, now lives in unemployment, disillusionment, and a phone full of motivational videos that no longer work. 1 in 5 young urbanites is out of work. But the government stopped releasing official numbers in August 2023. Know what that means? That the situation is even worse than it looks. It's the first post-reform generation that feels the future isn't guaranteed. Many grew up believing that, with effort and study, they'd have a better life than their parents. Now, they graduate from universities and move back in with their parents, not knowing if they'll ever be able to buy a house or even pay their own rent. And worse, this youth isn't just frustrated. They're connected, informed, and tired of empty slogans. The risk of all this? A perfect storm for silent protests, digital movements, and discontent that Xi's regime is trying to hide at any cost. Repression works for now, but the question is, for how long? Because when hope turns into cynicism and obedience turns into apathy, no AI, censorship, or slogan can win hearts back. The Communist Party knows this. That's why Xi Jinping insists on speeches that mix nationalism, prosperity, and sacrifice. But this generation wants answers, not metaphors. And maybe, for the first time in decades, the promise of the Chinese dream is being openly questioned. Not in the newspapers, but in the subtext of every message, every silence, every young person who simply gave up believing. Xi Jinping came to power promising the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Prosperity, global leadership, and a proud people. 13 years later, the picture is different. A stagnating economy, disillusioned youth, and a country starting to doubt its own future. The irony? Xi isn't being defeated by Washington, but by Beijing. The greatest enemy of the Chinese leader doesn't wear a blue suit or speak with an American accent. He's inside the house, in the empty towers of ghost towns, in the jobless youth, and in the retirees who fear they won't receive their pensions. The worst part, she knows this. And to avoid collapse, he's pouring billions into subsidies, trying to force the population to consume more. Discounts on appliances, benefits for those with children, paid holidays. It all sounds like a last-minute economic clearance sale. But is that enough? According to Chinese economists themselves, no. Without a structural reform that genuinely increases the population's income, these measures are like band-aids on a patient with internal bleeding. And here comes the political deadlock. Reforming the economy requires relinquishing control, something the Communist Party hates to do. More economic freedom means more social autonomy. And that, for Xi, is an unacceptable risk. Result? A leader cornered by two fears: the fear of losing control and the fear of losing the people's trust. And deep down, he knows the first he can repress, the second, is like sand slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, the Chinese dream is turning into a silent nightmare. One of those you wake up sweating but pretend everything is fine. While China presents itself to the world as the bastion of free trade and global stability, the recent memory of its trading partners tells another story. And it's not pretty. In 2020, it only took Australia suggesting an investigation into the origin of COVID-19 for Beijing to show its teeth. In response, Australian wines, barley, meat, coal, and even lobsters became targets of sanctions, tariffs, and embargoes disguised as health measures. The result? Some exports plummeted to practically zero. This is Xi Jinping's soft power, smiling at international summits, relentless in bilateral retaliation. The message was clear: challenge Beijing and pay the price, in dollars, jobs, and stability. But the world is starting to understand the game. Southeast Asian countries, for example, are already showing concern about becoming the new dumping ground for Chinese surpluses that no longer have room in the United States. Trump's last tariff war had already clogged these markets with Chinese products at rock-bottom prices, suffocating local industries. Now, with new tariffs on the horizon, the movie threatens to repeat itself. She tries to sell the image of a rational and reliable global leader, in contrast to the erratic and belligerent Trump. But just pull up the recent track record, and you'll see that China also plays hardball. It just prefers to do it away from the cameras. This contradiction undermines Beijing's attempt to present itself as a reliable alternative to the U.S.-led order. It's hard to be the savior of free trade when your closest partners live in fear of retaliation. The result? A divided, suspicious world, and increasingly aware that between the wolf in sheep's clothing and the bull out of control, maybe the best course is to choose neither. In a trade war, it's not always the loudest voice that wins, and Trump seems to have forgotten that. Despite all the fanfare and threats, the former U.S. president is already starting to blink. Recently, he admitted that tariffs on Chinese products should fall substantially. That was enough to ignite Chinese social media with a sharp remark. Trump backed down. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping keeps playing slow-motion chess. Beijing knows that, as painful as the U.S. economic pressure is, the U.S. also bleeds. The American industry can't, overnight, replace China's colossal industrial structure, not in price, scale, or speed. Making iPhones, sneakers, and batteries on American soil? Good luck. And while Trump weakens historic alliances with random attacks on friends and foes, Xi strengthens his ties in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. More than 145 countries now trade more with China than with the U.S. And that's no small thing. She knows that the trade battle is, at its core, a battle of endurance. And he's betting that he can withstand the pain longer than his opponent. More than that, he's using the crisis to reshape his economy, seek new markets, and sell himself as a global alternative. Even with a questionable track record, Trump may land the first punch, but who has the stamina for the following rounds? That's what's at stake. And by all indications, China isn't just holding up, it's enjoying the ring. While Trump seeks quick and cheap wins, Xi is playing the long game, and maybe that's where he has an advantage. Amid tariffs and tensions, China is reshaping its economy with an agenda that goes well beyond solving immediate crises. Instead of reacting like an angry dog, Xi is building an empire of alternative influences while preparing for the future. The question isn't who's going to win this trade war, but how is China going to reposition itself on the global stage? With the boost from the Belt and Road Initiative, which already connects more than 145 countries, Xi is expanding his strategic presence in emerging markets around the world. The search for new buyers and partners is allowing China to enjoy itself, while Trump struggles with his empty threats. The truth is that the Chinese economy, despite its internal struggles, like the collapse in the real estate market and the scarcity of jobs for youth, is already much less dependent on the United States than before. Trump may have given it a nudge, but China's trend was already to diversify. Xi's move also involves cutting-edge technology. The chip war cannot be ignored, but the Chinese leader wasn't shaken. China is betting on dominating artificial intelligence and making technological advances that rival America's giants. The issue here is clear. Xi doesn't need to win now. He just needs to keep moving forward, slowly, and, at the end of the game, he might make a victorious move. Let's be honest. While the U.S. president seems to care more about pleasing his voters than solving anything for real, Xi has his eyes on the finish line, and in the long run, he might be the one who comes out ahead. Trump's policies may give the impression that he's in control, but the reality is very different. Sanctions, tariffs, threats, all of this isn't exactly pushing China into an imminent crisis, as many predicted. Instead, they're revealing the fragilities of the U.S. economic system. Because, in the end, the Chinese have been playing this trade war game for much longer and have adapted. While Trump tries to close doors, China has been relentless in opening new ones, either through the Belt and Road Initiative or through more strategic partnerships with countries in the global south. What the West needs to understand is that, in the end, the winner may not be the loudest or the most aggressive. China has patience, and while Trump and his heavy tariffs policy are looking for a quick fix, Xi is betting on the future, creating a network of influence that will only grow over time. We're not just talking about a tariff war, but a global economic power play that goes well beyond the boundaries of China and the U.S. And, in the end, the truth is that this is a clash whose consequences may be much more complex than anyone imagines. And if you're European, you may already be feeling the impact. So, the question is, how long will Europe continue pretending to be a spectator and not a target in this clash? As if the superpower game didn't have a direct impact on the old continent. Let's be honest, if China repositions itself, if the U.S. retreats, what's Europe's true role in this global chessboard? If you still think Europe is safe and far from this economic storm, it might be time to rethink your bets. The world is changing fast, and Europe can't afford to sit on the sidelines. Now, I want to know what you think. What's at stake for Europe in all of this? Comment here, share your opinion, and let's discuss together. Because, in the end, the only certainty we have is that those who stay silent will be run over.